Scarred ex-governor's secret son reveals truth. Dead fiancé returns after 11 years. What happens when an 11-year-old boy knows his father's identity, but his mother thinks the secret is safe? What occurs when a woman believed dead for over a decade walks back into a man's life during the worst blizzard Montana territory has ever seen? Hit that like button and subscribe for more emotional Western romances that will leave you breathless. Comment below. Would you risk everything to protect the family you thought you'd lost forever? Now, let me tell you about the night young Tom Sullivan decided to stop being a child and start being the man his family needed. The letter crackled between small fingers as 11-year-old Tom Sullivan stood in the shadows of the hallway watching the man he knew was his father burn another piece of the past. Jake Sullivan's scarred profile caught the firelight as he fed Emily Morrison's words to the flames, unaware that his son observed this monthly ritual from the darkness. Tom had been watching for 3 years now, ever since he'd learned to read well enough to recognize his mother's careful handwriting on the envelopes. Ever since he'd realized that the return address, E. Morrison, Denver, matched the name his mother whispered in her sleep during nightmares. "That's the last one for this month," Jake murmured to the empty room, his voice carrying the weight of 11 years' grief. But it wasn't the last one. Tom fingered the letter hidden in his jacket pocket, the one he'd intercepted from today's mail delivery, the one that would change everything if Jake ever read it. The one where his mother finally wrote the truth she'd hidden for over a decade. "My dearest Jake, I know you've stopped reading these letters years ago, but I must try one more time. Our son, yes, our son, is growing so tall now. He has your eyes, your stubborn chin, your way of thinking 3 steps ahead of everyone else. He doesn't know who his father is, but he asks questions I can no longer answer with lies. If anything happens to me, if Harold finds us, please know that Tom Sullivan is your legacy, your blood, your future. He deserves to know the hero his father truly is. With all my love and eternal regret, Emily." Tom had memorized every word. His mother thought she was protecting everyone with her silence. But at 11 years old, he understood something adults often forgot. Secrets had power, and the person who held them chose when to use that power. Tonight, with the worst storm in Montana Territory history approaching, Tom had decided it was time. "Martha," Jake called toward the kitchen, "secure the house. Will says this storm will last 3 days at least." Martha's weathered hands paused in their bread kneading as she appeared in the doorway. "Already done, Mr. Jake, though I worry about travelers caught out in this weather." From his hiding place, Tom saw something pass between the housekeeper and his father. A look that spoke of shared knowledge of secrets, layered upon secrets. Martha knew more than she admitted. The old woman's eyes held the same careful watchfulness that his mother carried, the same way of protecting truths too dangerous to speak aloud. The front door burst open, bringing Will in a swirl of snow that reached nearly to the ranch foreman's knees. "Boss, we got trouble on Devil's Bend," Will announced, shaking ice from his coat. "Wagon overturned. I can hear children crying through the wind." Jake was already reaching for his rifle when Tom stepped from the shadows. "I'll come with you." Both men turned startled. Jake's scarred face showed surprise and automatic refusal. "Tom, I'm not a child," Tom interrupted, using the quiet authority he'd learned from watching Jake lead men. "And those children need help. I can carry medical supplies, hold lanterns, assist with the rescue. You'll need every hand." Jake studied his face for a long moment. Tom held his ground, letting his father see the determination that ran in Sullivan blood, the courage that had built this ranch and once governed a territory. "You stay with Will at all times," Jake said finally. "You do exactly what I tell you when I tell you." "Yes, sir." As they prepared for the rescue, Martha caught Tom's arm. Her fingers were strong for such an old woman, and her eyes held a knowing gleam. "You be careful out there, young'un," she said quietly. Storms bring more than just weather." Tom met her gaze steadily. "I know, Martha. I've been waiting for this storm my whole life." The ride to Devil's Bend was a nightmare of wind and snow, but Tom had grown up on this ranch, knew every trail and gully. He watched Jake navigate by instinct, more than sight, marveled at the way his father became something larger than himself when people needed saving. This was the man his mother had loved. This was the hero she'd spoken of in careful, neutral terms, never knowing that Tom had figured out the truth years ago. They found the overturned wagon wedged against the cliff wall, And Tom's heart stopped when he heard familiar voices calling for help. His mother's voice weak but alive. Annie's frightened cries. Baby Ben's wails. Jesus, Jake breathed, already moving toward the wreckage. How many inside? 4. Tom said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. A woman and 3 children. Jake shot him a sharp look. How could Tom know that? But there was no time for questions. They worked together to extract the trapped passengers, Tom holding lanterns and passing supplies while Jake did the dangerous work of lifting and carrying. When Jake emerged with Grace Hamilton in his arms, Tom saw his father's face change. Even through the snow and blood, even with 11 years of changes, some recognition flickered in Jake's gray eyes. The children, Grace whispered, as consciousness came and went. Are the children all safe? Jake assured her, his voice rougher than the wind required. All safe. Tom helped load his family, for that's what they were, whether Jake knew it yet or not, onto the emergency sledge. As they made the treacherous journey back to Thunder Valley Ranch, he found himself pressed against Jake's side for warmth, feeling the steady strength of his father's arm around him. You did good tonight, Tom, Jake said quietly, his words nearly lost in the storm. Real good. Your mother should be proud. She is, Tom replied, meaning it in ways Jake couldn't yet understand. She's always been proud of the man I'm becoming. Jake's arm tightened slightly around him. What's your mother like? Tom was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. She's the strongest person I know, and the saddest. She loves someone she thinks she can never have, and it's been killing her slowly for as long as I can remember. That's a heavy burden for a child to carry. I'm not a child, Tom said again, and this time Jake didn't argue. Back at the ranch, Martha took charge of the injured woman while Jake helped settle the children in the warm kitchen. Tom watched his father with Annie, and Ben saw the natural way Jake gentled his voice, the unconscious tenderness in his scarred hands as he checked them for injuries. This was what his mother had given up. This was what they'd all lost when fear had been stronger than love. Uncle Jake, Annie said sleepily, already adopting him with a child's easy trust. Are you married? No, sweetheart? Never married. Why not? You're nice. And handsome even with the marks on your face. Well, Jake's hand went unconsciously to his scars. Sometimes life doesn't work out the way we plan. Tom stepped closer. Did you ever love someone you couldn't marry? Jake's eyes met his, and Tom saw pain there. Old pain carefully tended like a wound that had never properly healed. Once, Jake said quietly. A long time ago. What happened to her? She died. At least, I thought she did. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and grief. Tom felt the weight of the letter in his pocket, the power of the truth he carried. What if she wasn't really dead? Tom asked carefully. What if she had to pretend to be dead to protect someone she loved? Jake stilled. That would be a cruel trick to play on someone who loved her. Not cruel, desperate. Tom's voice carried conviction beyond his years. Sometimes people make terrible choices for good reasons. Sometimes they sacrifice their own happiness to save the people who matter most. Martha peered in the doorway, her face grave. Mr. Jake, the woman's awake. She's asking for you. Jake rose, but Tom caught his arm. Pa, he said quietly, using the word for the first time in his life. Whatever happens tonight, whatever you learn, remember that love is stronger than secrets. And sometimes miracles wear different faces than we expect. Jake stared at him, something dawning in his expression. Tom, go to her, Tom said gently. She's been waiting 11 years to come home. Jake climbed the stairs on unsteady legs, his mind reeling from Tom's words. The boy knew something, more than something. The way he'd said pa, the quiet certainty in his voice, the knowledge in his young eyes. Grace Hamilton lay propped against pillows in what had once been Emily's room. Color returned to her face, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. In the lamplight cleaned of blood and snow, she was beautiful and achingly familiar. You saved us, she said simply, her voice stronger now. Thank you. Jake remained in the doorway, afraid to come closer, afraid of what he might see if he looked too carefully at her face. Anyone would have done the same. No, she shook her head firmly. Most people would have waited for the storm to pass. You risked your life for strangers. The children needed help. Tom especially. Grace's eyes searched his face. He speaks of you with such familiarity, as if he's known you all his life. Jake's heart hammered. He's a remarkable boy, brave, intelligent. You've raised him well. Have I? Grace's smile was sad. Sometimes I wonder if I've done him a disservice keeping him from what? From his father. The words hung between them like a physical presence. Jake finally entered the room, drawn by something beyond his control. Tom's father isn't in your life. Tom's father doesn't know he exists. Grace's voice broke slightly. I made sure of that. Why? Because I loved him too much to destroy him. Jake moved closer, his pulse roaring in his ears. Grace, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. She tensed. What do you want to know? Are you Emily Morrison? The question shattered the careful distance between them. Grace's face crumpled, 11 years of held tears finally breaking free. Emily Morrison died in a fire 11 years ago, she whispered. She died trying to save the man she loved from her own stupidity and fear. Jake was across the room in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms. Emily, God, Emily, I knew. Somehow I knew the moment I saw you. Jake, why? His voice was raw with 11 years of grief and anger and desperate love. Why did you let me think you were dead? Why did you take my son and disappear? Because Harold Blackwood threatened to destroy you completely if I didn't. Emily clung to him, breathing in the familiar scent of him, the solid reality of his presence. He had fabricated evidence that could have sent you to prison. He said if I stayed, if I married you, he would ruin you utterly. So you chose to break my heart instead. I chose to save your life. Emily pulled back to meet his eyes. I couldn't watch you destroyed because of me. And when I realized I was pregnant, you thought I wouldn't want my own child. I thought Tom would be safer if no one knew who his father was. Harold's reach was so long, his power so absolute. I couldn't risk him using our son against you. Jake cupped her face in his scarred hands. Our son, Tom, is our son. Yes, and he's everything you would have wanted in a child. Brave and kind and stubborn as a mule. He knows, Jake said suddenly. That's what he was trying to tell me downstairs. He knows I'm his father. Emily stiffened. That's impossible. I've never told him children are smarter than we think. And Tom has been watching me, studying me. He knew before we rescued you tonight. Before Emily could respond, a soft knock came at the door. Martha entered carrying tea, but her weathered face was tight with emotion. I thought you might need refreshment, she said carefully, her eyes moving between Jake and Emily with knowing intensity. Martha, Jake began, but the housekeeper held up a hand. Mr. Jake, there's something I need to tell you both. Something I should have said years ago. Emily looked up sharply. Martha, you recognize me. I've been recognizing you for years, child. Every letter you sent, every careful word. Martha's voice grew tender. You have your grandmother's hands. Your mother's way of tilting your head when you're thinking. My grandmother? Emily's voice was barely a whisper. Martha sat heavily in the chair beside the bed. Margaret Morrison was my daughter. Which makes you my granddaughter, Emily, and makes this old woman the biggest fool in Montana territory for not telling you sooner. The world tilted. Emily stared at the woman who'd been Jake's housekeeper for 15 years, searching her weathered features for familiar lines. You're my grandmother. I knew your mother before she married your father and moved to Denver. When she died and you came to live with your father's family, I hoped you'd have a good life. When you got engaged to Jake, I was so happy. My granddaughter was finally coming home. But when I died, I knew it wasn't real, Martha said simply. A grandmother knows, but I also knew you must have had reasons, terrible reasons to fake your death. So I waited. I kept watch over Jake, hoping someday you'd find your way back. Jake's mind was reeling. You've known for 11 years that Emily was alive. I suspected, I hoped, but I couldn't be certain until tonight when I saw her with the children, saw the way she moved through this house like she belonged here. Martha's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Mr. Jake. I should have told you my suspicions. But if I was wrong, you were protecting everyone, Emily said softly, understanding flooding her features. Just like I was. A commotion from downstairs interrupted them. Tom's voice urgent and commanding. We'll get the men armed. Someone's coming up the road, and they're not riding friendly. Jake was on his feet, instantly reaching for his rifle. Stay here. Both of you. Like hell, Emily said, rising despite Martha's protests. If someone's coming for us, I need to face them. Emily. It's Harold, she said with grim certainty. Somehow he's found us, and this time I'm not running. They found Tom in the kitchen, calmly loading a rifle with the competence of someone far older than his 11 years. Annie and Ben were nowhere to be seen. Where are the children? Emily demanded. Safe room behind the pantry, Tom replied without looking up. Annie's reading to Ben. They'll be fine. Tom, you need to go with them. No. Tom's voice carried absolute authority. This is my fight too. He's been hunting my family my whole life. I'm done hiding. Jake looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw himself at that age. The same steady hands, the same quiet courage, the same willingness to stand between danger and the people he loved. How many riders? Jake asked. 6, armed. The leader matches the description Mama gave me of Harold Blackwood. Emily's face went white. You described Harold to him. I told him everything, Mama, about the threats, about why you had to disappear, about the real reason Papa got burned. Tom's eyes met hers steadily. I'm not a child anymore. I deserve to know the truth about my family. The truth about my burns. Jake's voice was dangerous quiet. Emily closed her eyes. You didn't get those scars saving a random child from a fire. You got them trying to save me from the Harold's warehouse, the one where he was storing the evidence of his crimes. I was trying to steal proof of what he'd done when he trapped me inside and set it ablaze. You were in that building. I escaped through a window in the back, but you came through the front thinking someone was still inside. You nearly died because I was too proud to wait for help. Jake stared at her, pieces of a puzzle he'd carried for 11 years finally clicking into place. That's why you disappeared after the fire. You blamed yourself. I blamed myself, and Harold made sure I knew that staying would get you killed. He said the fire was just a warning. Next time he'd make sure we both burned. The front windows exploded inward in a shower of glass and gunfire. Jake shoved Emily behind the kitchen table as bullets splintered the wooden frame where her head had been moments before. Emily Morrison, Harold Blackwood's cultured voice called through the broken windows. 11 years is a long time in a run, my dear. Time to come home. Harold stepped through the shattered doorway flanked by 5 armed men. He was older now, distinguished silver hair and expensive clothes marking his rise to political power. But his eyes held the same cruel intelligence that had haunted Emily's nightmares. Hello, Jacob, Harold said pleasantly. You're looking weathered. The hermit life doesn't seem to agree with you. Jake rose slowly, his rifle trained on Harold's chest. Get out of my house. I'm afraid I can't do that. You see, you're harboring fugitives, a kidnapper and 3 stolen children. Harold produced official-looking papers. Federal warrants signed by territorial judges. Emily Morrison is wanted for kidnapping, fraud, and conspiracy. Conspiracy to do what? Jake's voice was deadly quiet. To defraud the federal government naturally. Did you know your dear Emily has been using multiple identities to claim homestead rights across 3 territories? Quite the criminal enterprise. That's a lie, Tom said, clearly stepping into view with his rifle held competently. And you know it. Harold's eyes fixed on the boy with predatory interest. Well, the mysterious child. You must be Tom. Sullivan, I believe, interesting surname choice. It's my name, Tom said steadily. My father's name. Is it indeed? Harold's smile was cold. And does your father know what his bastard son really is? The living proof of Emily Morrison's deception. Jake's rage exploded white hot. Touch my son, and I'll kill you where you stand. Your son? Harold's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. How fascinating. But then I suppose incest runs in criminal families. The insult hung in the air for one heartbeat before Jake's rifle swung toward Harold's men. But he was outnumbered, and Harold knew it. Now, Jacob, let's not be hasty. You have 1 rifle, I have 5 trained men. The mathematics are quite simple. It was then that Martha's voice rang out from the kitchen doorway, sweet and deadly. Might want to recalculate, Senator. Harold spun to see the elderly woman standing calmly behind him, a double-barreled shotgun pointed at his spine. At the same moment, Will and 4 ranch hands appeared at windows and doorways, rifles trained on Harold's men. Seems you're the one who's outnumbered, Jake observed. Harold's composure cracked. This is a federal matter. You're interfering with official business. Official business done by breaking and entering in the dead of night. Martha's voice was acidly sweet. Shooting up a family's home. That's not how federal marshals operate, Senator. Moreover, another voice added from the front door, I don't see any real federal warrants. Everyone turned to see Judge Patterson entering with two actual federal marshals, their badges gleaming in the lamplight. Harold's face went ashen. Judge Patterson, I wasn't aware you were in this area. Funny thing about that, the judge replied dryly. I've been investigating some very interesting allegations about forged documents, bribery, and conspiracy. Your name features prominently in several witness statements. One of Harold's men made a sudden move toward his weapon. Tom's rifle cracked, and the man's gun went flying. I wouldn't, Tom suggested with eerie calm. Senator Blackwood, Judge Patterson continued, you're under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, attempted murder, and an impressive list of federal crimes, Marshals. As Harold was restrained, his face twisted with rage. You think this ends anything? I have allies across 3 territories. I'll destroy all of you. Actually, Emily said, stepping fully into the light, you won't. She pulled a thick bundle of papers from her medical bag. 11 years of evidence, Senator. Every threat you made, every crime you committed, every person you destroyed. I've been documenting it all. Harold stared at the papers in horror. Those documents were destroyed in the fire. You destroyed copies. I kept the originals. Emily's voice grew stronger. Along with witness testimony from your former associates who decided cooperation was preferable to hanging. Judge Patterson accepted the evidence with satisfaction. Outstanding work, Mrs. It is Mrs. Isn't it? Actually, Jake said, moving protectively beside Emily, it's Mrs. Sullivan, has been for 11 years in every way that matters. And this young man, the judge nodded toward Tom. Tom Sullivan, Tom said clearly, son of Jake and Emily Sullivan. Harold's bitter laugh echoed through the room. How touching. But do any of you know the real truth? Do you know why Emily Morrison really had to die? Harold, don't, Emily warned. She wasn't just running from my threats. Harold continued viciously. She was running from the truth about her own family, about the blood money that built the Morrison fortune. Martha stepped forward, her shotgun still trained on Harold. That's enough out of you. Ask her about her grandfather's railroad contracts, Harold pressed. Ask her about the Chinese workers who died building those tracks. Ask her about the Morrison family's partnership with corrupt territorial officials. My grandfather was a good man, Emily said, but doubt flickered in her voice. Harold's smile was poisonous. Your grandfather was my business partner, Emily. Every corrupt deal I made, he profited from. The Morrison fortune was built on the same foundation as mine. You're not an innocent victim. You're an heiress to criminal empire. The words hit Emily like physical blows. Everything she'd believed about her family, about her own identity, that's a lie, Tom said firmly. Whatever our grandfather did doesn't define who we are. Mama's spent 11 years trying to make amends, trying to build something good from something broken. The boy's right, Jake added, his arm around Emily's shoulders. We're not our ancestors' crimes, we're the choices we make today. Judge Patterson cleared his throat. Fascinating as this family history is, we have federal crimes to prosecute. Senator, you'll be transported to Denver for trial. As Harold was led away in chains, he called back venomously, This isn't over, Sullivan. You can't escape what you really are. But his words no longer carried power. Emily leaned into Jake's embrace, feeling the weight of 11 years' secrets finally lifting. Is it really over? She whispered. It's over, Jake confirmed. Harold Blackwood will never threaten our family again. Tom joined them, no longer the 11-year-old boy, but not quite the man he was becoming. What happens now? Emily looked at her son, her husband, the home she'd thought lost forever. Now we figure out how to be a family, all of us together. Martha wiped away happy tears. I'll make hot chocolate. Lord knows we all need something warm after this night. As the federal marshals departed with their prisoners and Will began boarding up the broken windows, the Sullivan family found themselves alone in their kitchen. Battered but whole secrets, finally shared love, finally acknowledged. I have something for you, Tom said quietly, pulling the letter from his pocket. I intercepted it from today's mail. Jake unfolded the paper, reading Emily's words about their son, about love and legacy and hope. His throat tightened. How long have you known, he asked Tom. 3 years, since I learned to read your name on the envelopes. Why didn't you say something sooner? Tom's smile was wise beyond his years, because families find their way back to each other when they are ready. And tonight, we were finally ready. 6 months later, on the first warm day of spring, all of Thunder Valley gathered at the new schoolhouse for the wedding of Jake Sullivan and Emily Morrison Sullivan. Because as Martha had discovered while researching family records, their engagement 11 years ago had included a proxy marriage ceremony she'd witnessed as Emily's next of kin. We were always married, Emily had realized, laughing through tears when Martha explained the legal technicalities. All this time we were always married. Then this is just making it official, Jake had replied, spinning her around their kitchen. Making it real in front of Bo, in territory, and anyone else who wants to challenge it. Now Emily stood at the altar in the schoolhouse she'd built with her own hands, wearing her grandmother's wedding dress that Martha had carefully preserved. She watched their children take their roles seriously. Annie scattered wildflower petals with solemn concentration. Ben toddled down the aisle carrying rings tied securely to a pillow, and Tom stood proudly beside Jake as his best man. Dearly beloved, Judge Patterson began, his voice carrying across the schoolhouse, filled with ranchers and townspeople who'd become family. We are gathered not just to witness a wedding, but to celebrate something extraordinary. The restoration of what was broken, the healing of what was wounded, the triumph of love over fear. Emily's eyes never left Jake's scarred face as the judge spoke. He looked handsome in his best suit, distinguished and strong, the years of loneliness replaced by contentment and hope. When he smiled at her, the scars that had once symbolized their separation now seemed like badges of honor, proof of his courage and his capacity to endure. Emily Sullivan, Judge Patterson continued, do you take this man as your husband, knowing his past and believing in his future, choosing him not just today, but every day for the rest of your life? I do, Emily said clearly. I choose Jake Sullivan as my husband, my partner, my home, every day through every storm for the rest of our lives. And Jacob Sullivan, do you take this woman as your wife, knowing her journey and honoring her strength, choosing her not just today, but every day for the rest of your life? I do. Jake's voice was rough with emotion. I choose Emily as my wife, my love, my miracle, the woman who taught me that sometimes the greatest gifts come back to us when we've learned to deserve them. Tom stepped forward with the rings, his young face serious with the weight of the moment. These rings, Judge Patterson announced, were blessed 11 years ago by the love of two young people who thought they had forever. Today they're blessed again by the wisdom of two adults who know that forever is a choice made daily, a commitment renewed each morning, a love that survives separation and grows stronger through trial. When Jake slipped the ring onto Emily's finger, she felt the completion of a circle that had been broken for too long. When she placed his ring, she whispered words only he could hear. Welcome home, my love. By the power vested in me by Montana territory, Judge Patterson declared, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Again. Jake, you may kiss your bride. Again. Their kiss tasted like spring sunshine and wild roses, like children's laughter and the promise of tomorrow. When they broke apart, the schoolhouse erupted in cheers and applause. At the reception in the schoolyard, Martha presided over a feast that included a wedding cake with perfectly even layers. Emily had learned to bake properly under her grandmother's patient tutelage. Speech was called out, and Jake stood pulling Emily up beside him. Most of you know our story. Jake began, his arm around his wife's waist. How Emily supposedly died 11 years ago. How I became a hermit. How 3 children and a blizzard brought us back together. He looked out at the crowd, neighbors who'd become family friends, who'd stood by them through the darkest nights, the community that had embraced their unconventional reunion. What you might not know is the real lesson in all of this. Love isn't just about the easy choices, the perfect moments, the fairy tale endings. Real love is about the choice to keep loving when everything seems impossible. It's about the faith to believe in miracles, the courage to fight for what matters, and the wisdom to know that the best families are often the ones we choose. Emily stepped forward to add her words. 11 years ago, I was a frightened girl who thought love meant protecting someone by walking away. Today, I'm a woman who knows that love means staying fighting, choosing each other every single day, no matter what the world throws at us. She looked at Tom, who stood tall and proud in his first adult suit, at Annie and Ben, who'd grown into their roles as Sullivan children with natural grace. These children taught me that families aren't just made by blood. They're made by choice, by commitment, by the daily decision to love without conditions or reservations. To choice, Jake raised his glass. To family, Emily added. To love that never dies. Tom contributed, his voice carrying new depth. To coming home, Annie and Ben chorused together, and the whole gathering drank to that. To the home they'd all helped build, the love they'd witnessed triumph, the family that had been forged from loss and found its way back to joy. As the sun set over Thunder Valley, Jake and Emily danced to Martha's fiddle music, their children spinning around them, their friends and neighbors celebrating the miracle of second chances and love that refuses to surrender. Any regrets? Jake asked, echoing the question he had posed that first night when Grace Hamilton had agreed to stay at his ranch. Only one, Emily replied, her eyes sparkling with mischief and deep contentment. That it took us 11 years to learn that love is stronger than fear, that families are stronger than secrets, that some bonds can't be broken even by death. We have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time. The rest of our lives, Emily agreed, standing on tiptoe to kiss her husband under the Montana stars. That should be just enough time to love you the way you deserve to be loved. Tom watched his parents dance, feeling the satisfaction of a plan 11 years in the making finally complete. He'd carried the weight of family secrets since he was old enough to understand them, had waited patiently for the right moment to help love triumph over fear. Now as he watched Annie teach Ben to dance, while Martha clapped time as he saw Will and the ranch hands celebrating with genuine joy as he witnessed his parents lost in each other's eyes after more than a decade of separation, Tom Sullivan smiled. Some people spent their whole lives waiting for their real story to begin. Tom had spent 11 years writing his family's story, guiding it toward this moment when all the pieces finally fit together. In the schoolhouse where Emily taught children to read and dream, where Jake had learned to hope again, where 3 orphaned children had found their forever home. The story that began with secrets and sorrow became the legend of Thunder Valley. Proof that sometimes love doesn't just conquer all. Sometimes love heals what seemed permanently broken. Sometimes love brings back what was thought lost forever. And sometimes love is patient enough to wait 11 years for the perfect moment to come home. As the celebration continued under a blanket of stars, the Sullivan family knew they'd found something rare and precious. A love strong enough to survive separation, a family bond deep enough to withstand secrets, and a home built not just of wood and stone, but of commitment, forgiveness, and the unshakable belief that some promises are worth keeping forever. The boy who'd grown up too fast could finally be a child again, safe in the knowledge that his family was complete. The woman who'd spent 11 years running could finally rest knowing she'd found her way back to the only place she'd ever truly belonged. The man who'd thought himself too broken for happiness could finally believe in tomorrow, surrounded by the family he'd thought lost forever. And in Thunder Valley, where storms brought miracles and love conquered even death, they lived not just happily ever after, but truly, completely, eternally together.